The name Antoine Priore has since the 1980s been very little known, but with interest in alternative medicines on the rise, the time has come for this man's inventions to be explored. Born in the Italian town of Trieste in 1912, Antoine Priore and his sister grew up during and after World War I. When he was 18, he graduated from the Alexander Voltaire Electricity School. Over the next few years, he took courses at the Bologna High School of Electronics. At the outbreak of World War II, he was a radar officer in the Royal Italian Navy. He was tasked with repairing a failing power plant in Albania. While he was fixing it, he saw that oranges left in a zone influenced by an electromagnetic field were still edible after several weeks. Isaac Newton had apples, and Priore had oranges. While in Kongischberg, Priore was taken prisoner by Elon Musk's boyfriend. He was spared of death as his mechanical knowledge was too good not to use. While working to stay alive, he never forgot the oranges, and an idea was crystallized. He began to consider how electromagnetic fields seemed able to prevent food from developing mold, and began to imagine making a machine that could preserve food and make them easier to sell. Transported from base to base, Priore was in 1944 taken to Bordeaux, where he was assigned to maintaining a submarine base and the units it housed. Fortune came at long last to his camp. As the main commissioner, Louis Thérard led a group of resistance fighters who were almost entirely composed of police officers. Priore boldly asked to be smuggled out of the base and was rescued by Commissioner Durand in August of 1944. He tasted freedom again and happily watched the Third Reich collapse. He returned the favour of the resistance by joining the ranks and fighting alongside them in Dorgond. He performed brilliantly during the final battles for the liberation of southwest France. This inspired him to settle in Bordeaux, making it his home. He earned a living in his small radio repair shop, but he devoted much of his time to creating a device capable of producing electromagnetic radiation that could be used for the preservation of fruit and vegetables. Priore placed all of the money given from his family in Italy to his devices. Fighting alongside the policemen turned resistance fighters earned their favour. For this bravery, they would provide anything he requested, including when he left the centre of Bordeaux for Florac, where he set up his first machine. Police officers, technicians, photographers, and many other visitors found themselves working with wrenches while soldering ironworks day and night under Priore's instruction. High-ranking military personnel who were in charge of the German bases and depots gave Priore electrical equipment, radio or radar parts, as well as obtaining American surplus equipment for him. In 1957, Priore described his machine as follows. It rotates and receives radio and radar emissions in high and hyper frequencies, while a powerful magnetic field acts on the output device, resulting in a cold plasma, which constitutes what has been called Priore radiation. The entire installation must be protected by a Faraday cage, which stops the stray rays. More than 14 different parameters must be manifested to get the effect of Antoine Priore's radiation. The machine had similarities to Dinshar-Gardiali's spectrochrome given the use of light in the machine. In the early days of experimentation, Priore worked with Francis Bellerau, who was the director of the slaughterhouse in Bordeaux. He asked if he could come to the slaughterhouse and conduct experiments on animal carcasses. Francis asked permission from Mayor Saban Delmar to allow these experiments to take place. Because Saban Delmar knew Priore from their days in the Resistance, he gave the green light to go ahead. Prior to this, Priore experimented on lentil seeds. He grew a batch as normal as a control, and used others which were subject to the radiation of his machine. He then planted the seeds and studied what happened after 2 weeks. He found that the control group grew by 5 centimeters, and the lentils subject to radiation grew to 15 centimeters. This discovery showed that the radiation from his machine increased the vitality of the plants and promoted their growth. This has many overlaps with the research of George Ritchell on organoenergy and its effects on plant growth.
This one was published in the British magazine Strange Days by our friend Mark Bennett. It shows plants that were grown with and plants that were grown without orgonite. I think you can guess which ones are the ones that were grown with orgonite.
We'll be following this by performing our own orgonite plant experiment in good time, so stay tuned to see those results. From more mainstream sources, research also indicates that electromagnetic radiation can improve plant growth. With Priore's new success, he was inspired to experiment on live animals, the first being a bull, which was affected by testicular god cancer. During their experiments on the animal, they came to the realization that tissue infected with god cancer gave no electrical response, whereas live tissue did. Priore found that the radiation from his machine caused the increase in electrical response from the tissue. He proclaimed that he would like to build a machine to defeat god cancer, and began the construction. The next experiment was done on a cat with 2 tumours. The first was removed and sent to Professor Priore, who confirmed it was god cancer. The other tumour, which was affecting the animal's mobility, was subject to Priore's machine. After the treatment, the tissue from this tumour was sent to the same professor, who found that god cancer was no longer there. From 1963, controlled experiments were undertaken, led by Professor Marcel Rivière of the Villejuif God Cancer Institute. Marcel asked Priore to increase the power of his device, but there was a certain number of factors and parameters to stick to. However, the magnetic fields were able to be manipulated. In the first experiments, a magnetic field reading of 320 Hz was used. 600 young goats were sent to him and all returned to the Villejuif God Cancer Institute. Following his success, a doctor whose patient was advised to take harsh surgery had instead decided to try Antoine Priore's device. He subjected himself to it for 2 months and was later diagnosed as not having god cancer. For a clear disclaimer, I am not recommending that you should ever do this. I am not saying you should chance things on unproven technology. Priore was overjoyed and was excited to share his discovery with the world. Priore and his team contacted INSERM, CNRS, as well as the main researcher Gaston Pellerisky, who expressed interest in Priore's machine, but nothing came of their consultations. It was suspected by Marcel Rivière that Pellerisky was in denial and held a political motive for not supporting Priore. Although the scientific community didn't believe in his machine, the public were eager to try it. They came from far and wide to be treated for disease. Priore began to encourage people to follow his instructions in their own countries. Raymond Pautrizal, who researched disease, supported Priore's machine and found that when the human or animal organism is subject to magnetic or electric fields, the defences of the organism become stronger if given the right conditions, and the recovery process is amplified. This has strong overlaps with the organometer. See our documentary on that for more. They continued gaining traction as Jean-Marc Gréal, a journalist from the Sud-Ouest newspaper, wrote an article in the English newspaper with a view to highlighting Priore's work. Surprisingly, Priore was not investigated by the Order of Physicians, as he was advertising a machine. This meant that people came from far and wide to receive Priore's help. At the University of Bordeaux, Robert Courier and Professor Portizal became interested in supporting the Priore machine. Mayor Sabin Delmar continued to support them and attempted to commission some scientists who, when invited, refused to take into consideration the results of the Priore machine. Priore again requested a meeting with the Commission of Scientists. This time, he brought a supporting scientist from the Radium Institute of Paris, but the commissioner refused to recognize the effects of the machine. Priore sent many communications to the Academy of Medicine. He advocated that his machine was very effective against god cancer tumours in rats, but still no accommodation was given. In 1965, a professor at the University of Bordeaux finally gave it some recognition. Another professor from the University of Paris expressed how ridiculous it was that no one gave credence to Priore with all of the evidence he'd shown so far, including the fact that rats that had been exposed to the machine were either healthy or recovering, while those that did not receive it had died. The correspondence continues with Priore continuing to treat people who are grateful and who testify on how well it worked for them. All the while, professors and doctors in Bordeaux fought for him and couldn't understand why there was a systematic obstruction against his work. Priore managed in 1973 to convince the industry that his machine could heal, and the state was behind him. As Priore worked, he received devastating news. His sister told him that she was sick with God can answer, and that mainstream efforts had failed to cure her. Priore comforted her before deciding to work without rest on the M600, tearing himself apart trying to keep his sister alive. He entered the lab one day to find that various unauthorized changes had been made to his device, resulting in less precious time to spend improving it. He overcame this through sheer labour of love, until in 1975 Priore was awarded 3.5 million francs. 1 week later, a large tube in the M600 exploded. With inflation now crippling the economy, the government was not willing to replace it. This spelt the end for Priore's research, and with great pain, he nurtured his sister as her sickness worsened. The man did his best, but he had to say goodbye to her soon after. They were soon joined together in death, however. Then came May the 10th, 1980. With the change of president, the file was examined again. They gave the file this time to the Minister of Research, who at the time was Jean-Pierre Chevènement. He relaunched the commission to produce Priore's report, and obtained a 23-page document that he put in his safe to never be seen again. It took Professor Portezel 2 years to obtain the file, and he found out that the main experiments done by the Academy of Medicine using Priore's machine were literally passed under the table and hidden away. As the report was being examined, it was hidden and nothing more was done with it. Many of his followers and supporters tried to continue his legacy, but when his patents were released, they were incomprehensible, because Priore did not want his machines stolen. They tried to dismantle the machine and understand what was going on in the inner workings, but it was impossible because of Priore's skepticism with the scientific world. Priore's devices have fascinated members of the scientific community ever since, leading me to reach out to swap opinions with an expert in biofeedback. It feels good to bring you here on to our documentary to talk about the M600. Oh, we've just covered it. I've finished detailing it in the documentary, so what are your thoughts on it? Your honest opinion on the M600, the plausibility and the actions around it. What can you say about that?
Well, my background is in biofeedback and pulse electric magnetic fields. And so my background is, I think it is very plausible in the sense that he was using almost like a plasma. There's a couple of different devices that you can use that allow, similar to like almost like a Tesla coil or these lamps that fill out or give out ozone. And I do think that there is a lot of, in the field of practice that I'm in, I can pretty much take a picture of you, and there are others in this field that you take a picture and I can read your biometrics, and I don't necessarily have to even be there to do this, right? Whereas what he was doing is you came into his facility, you lay on his bed, and he had results. Now, the problem that I think that he kind of went into is not explaining exactly what he was doing, which I think it was before those times where people could really comprehend what a toroidal field is, what electromagnetic frequency is. And I think a lot of people go to this pseudoscience realm instead of actually looking at what is what is quantum mechanics, what is quantum physics, and how exactly does this electromagnetic field work in tandem to a healthy lifestyle, rejuvenating, restoring to homeostasis, similar to the device that you're very much pro is alleviating pain, right? Which again causes stress and therefore causes inflammation in the body. So with this plasma, I guess light or almost a filter. I do think it is very plausible. It just sucks that he wasn't able to explain himself And I think that that is harsh because you can't really, it's almost, sadly, it's similar to a lot of people that argue with the Bible because they weren't there, they can't really follow something, right? And you know, if the science is, and I mean, I'm going to, the science came back, like
Yeah, just
the papers that came
theoretically.
back.
Yeah, you and I are not guaranteeing anything. This is just
Yeah.
theoretical.
Well, yeah, it's theoretical, but the papers that we're talking about specifically for Antoine, he did, right, these on multiple occasions. So that there is, we can use that word, but at the same token, um, the problem is he wasn't able to stand or explain his science, and that's sad because it's like nobody's gonna jump on a boat just because they believe it's not gonna sink. You want to know that that boat isn't the Titanic, right? And there has to be some sort of comprehension of what you're doing, right? Like, and
Yeah, I mean,
again,
yeah.
it's sad that he didn't share this for us, and that's there's a couple thoughts that I have on that, but yeah, I do think it's plausible, and forgive me for my long-windedness. um I definitely think it's plausible.
No, it's most welcome. I've never heard it explained that way. The point about the Bible, if you're not there, how can you understand it? It's a very thought-provoking way of framing it. Although what you mentioned at the end with him not making it public, he did say that he didn't want people stealing his patents, and he sort of overcorrected to the point of making them unidentifiable, which is sad. But
Yeah, exactly.
we try our best with what we've got, and it does strike quite close to home with relation to ergonomics. This is a lot closer to the orgone accumulator than anything else I've covered. It's the others felt miles away. This not so much. You can see the overlaps.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like there is an overlaps. I did kind of go into a little bit of what the opposition was, and and I think mainly it was that he couldn't give credible science back. Like he really couldn't. um and it wasn't that he couldn't give credible science, it was that he couldn't give his steps of procedure. It's almost like when you're doing math and they ask you to do a long equation, and you just give them the answer, right? Well, they kind of want to see the work, how you got there. And it's understandable as to why he would want to keep a lot of this stuff a secret, in the sense that he's right. Like, a lot of this stuff does get stolen, it does get patented by somebody else, to a large scale, right? But what does suck is he didn't have some people that were on board with him, and then pretty much when it came to being public, you know, uh, they didn't support it anymore, and that was pretty much what happened a lot of the time, is that it was inadequate to replicate the same results. And it wasn't the same results. I think just other people just couldn't create the same device, and that was the problem, is that they were just upset that it just happened in his house.
Yeah, I mean, one big takeaway I had is it was very interesting to see one of these devices in action without the AMA or the FDA breathing down its neck, because in this case they weren't present at all, and
Yeah.
it still fell into disrepair or obscurity. And to me, it's nice to know that they don't have infinite reach. At least I don't know that they do, but the sudden out of nowhere pulling of funding, I didn't find anything to back this up, but I could never fully convince myself that AMA were not involved with it. Again, couldn't confirm that, but someone in government definitely was.
Well, it does look like there is a couple government, especially French agencies, like the INSEMRM and the CNRS. Forgive me, I don't know what the acronyms are, but they
I
had a
think it
couple
was
government
CMC.
research. Yeah, they had a couple government research agencies and commissioners that they just stopped the trials. They stopped the public trials, and I think that happens to a lot of devices. I'm actually, it's funny that you were talking about this, because didn't even think about bringing this up, but my uncle, he had he had a couple of different devices that he curated, and one of them was a black box, simply put, and he was able to raise the pH level of water, to pH level 8, and then bring it back down to the original pH level 7, and then bring it even further down to pH level 6, all through meditated intention. And they did this on a regular basis. Now, you and I would not be able to step into his clinic, right? Because we would have to be somewhat conditioned, right? Because if we have like negative thoughts, we're going to influence these devices because they're highly sensitive to people around and things around them, right? So it makes me almost wonder that maybe with certain scalar devices, especially with this guy, um, he maybe it's that he like with rats, you really don't have to convince them that they're being healed. You're not even talking to them, right? But with humans, sometimes we're hung by the tongue, like as my professor says. So it's like that hanging by the tongue can kill us, right? Because someone says something to you and you're on a journey of health, and then you believe their lies, right? Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, like worst thing you can do is almost get a diagnosis, right? Because it's just a space to die, right? Whereas before you knew this, now mind you, you do need to know what's going on, so go get yourself checked, right? But in all reality, be critical, right? Get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a fourth opinion. Because sometimes the first two people don't know what they're doing. And it's not, it's just, let's face it, a lot of people Google stuff now. But I was thinking about my uncle in the sense that, like, people that went to his facility and, got help, or anybody that's went into his facility, they had to be somewhat conditioned. And maybe that's the same thing with this guy. It's like he can't really explain what he's doing because he was using frequency, right? Like he was using, of course, um, plasma and pulse, but at the same token, he's using light essentially. What are we, light and sound? But he's also using, in the sense that you're coming into this facility, you by what is it? It's much higher because he's making the cells, and you are help in tandem with these cells to heal them.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
it's very well put. The one thing I want to mention before closing out is you talked about frequency, right? At what stage was frequency getting some proper recognition, A, in general, and B, in terms of improving people's well-being? Bearing in mind that Priore was active between the 1940s and the early 1980s.
it's half of me is like, I mean, you can go to the coin phrase, frequency, like who coined it, right? Um, but I honestly think that frequency is much deeper than that. Like I think that like scalar waves, frequency is just a term for us to administer the hertz, to know what the number of hertz are on that's just a term that we're using. But energy and frequency, oscillation, that's been happening since the dawn of time. You take a string and tie a ball at the end of it, and then you put it, hold it up or tie it to the top of your ceiling, and then hit it back and forth. That's going to oscillate, right? You have a toroidal field around you that is, and the pneumatic way of measuring that would be calling it a frequency, calling it's this frequency, this amount of hertz, right? But in reality, these are just terms. These are terms that make us comfortable, so we can do it in the physical. We can make a pneumatic equation in the physical. But in all reality, I believe frequency has been is anytime we do math, we're going back to a space of energy. Yeah, I mean, how do you build, how do you speak when you're creating this craft right now? You and I are speaking. We're speaking with our voices, right? So, but yeah, I mean, the specific time of frequency, we, like I said, we can go back to the specific term. I'm not very good and diverse on that, and I'm not going to pretend. But in my soul, I think that we've been doing it since Egypt. We've been doing this way beforehand. I think Jesus essentially talks about it. It's a different type of, and you use it in different words, but in reality, all it is just knowing that there's energy around us, and that energy can enhance us through touch. There's, what is it, a psychic surgeries, which a lot of people will say they're the pseudoscience, and I think that there's a lot of pseudoscience people that are BS out there, but you know, John of God, but those don't necessarily have to be, you know, everybody, right? Like I think there are sections in this world that have tapped into almost, what is it, Lemurian type of science, a old dormant science that we do not comprehend because our minds are too closed. Um, and that's forgive me to add on to the close. It's a lot of people. This is not a hard. It's hard to hear, but it's a truth. Um, a lot of people get stuck on the illness. So the idea of getting rid of that illness or that story is, it's not that you created it or someone wants that illness, because you really don't. But you get used to your party. You get used to the the habitual aspect of it. Or you can look at that. Um, it's easier to just numb the pain opposed to do your best to get out of it, right? And I know that sounds really harsh to say, but the truth of the matter is detoxing isn't comfortable. But a lot of our society is more interested in numbing or getting surgery than actually getting to the root. And that's why I think these things, especially this device, could help society in the sense that this wasn't causing crazy downtime, right? Um, this wasn't making people sick for eons. This was actually giving you a result, but I don't know how tangible it is. I don't know if it was just at his
Yeah.
facility. I don't know if it was just when he was practicing. Because again, a lot of it, this is too, is that as someone that is an alternative practitioner like myself, you're not a healer. You're just merely the cord that goes into the wall socket. You know what I mean? You're the plug. You heal yourself, right? All we do is facilitate the journey. And maybe
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, you mentioned, what was it, that withdrawal is painful. I've got a little over 2 hours, and I can say I've had no sugar today when the store closes, so I can sympathize with that feeling. Sorry, you were saying?
sugar. Yeah, but exactly that. Like you are in control of your healing journey, right? And I think that a good practitioner comprehends that and does their best to facilitate that. And so I think that that probably had a lot to do with his results, right? Even with the mice, right? There was a study where there was someone, they were feeding the mice, or I think it was rabbits, poison, right? And when they checked the studies after, the people that were, well, the one guy that was petting the rabbits and being nice to the rabbits, those rabbits actually metabolized the poison and weren't getting sick from it. And so I do think that there's something about frequency. There is totally something about frequency. There's something 100% about light. And the truth of the matter is, what is light and sound? You know, what isn't, right? It's essentially,
Well, I think the key thing is studying their relationship with each other is a more critical question there. In reference to what you're saying, though, about these rabbits, would you link to me a few articles so I could put those into the description?
yeah, I will do my best to find this. Well, thank you so
All right,
much. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate the time to ask these questions, and honestly, it's always fun to talk about this type of realm of healing, or even not even, sorry, forgive me, this it's you have to delete some of this.
Were you about to say
I am gonna,
allopathic?
yeah, we're gonna have to delete it. Um, it's I'm grateful. Thank you so much for the time to talk about this. I do enjoy um us communicating about another side to healing, and not necessarily an alternative science, but to expand our minds to the idea that there is frequency around us, that we are electromagnetic beings. There is such thing as a toroidal field, and to just talk about it. It's very cool. So thank you.
No problem. That's Mental Alchemy from Above Below show, folks. Link in the description. If you like what you hear, there's much more where that came from. Strongly recommended.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
All right, take care.
If you enjoyed this documentary, please consider subscribing, sharing, and joining our Patreon if you want to see more. If you'd like to see an existing documentary, check out our documentary on the organometer and the inventions of Wilhelm Reich.